Now, like most, people who have played the odd, video game or any sort of strategy game in the past, from either Settlers of Catan to something like Scythe, um, they will always tell you you cannot um, commit to wars or even defeating your opponent unless you've got at least some solid base of economic support to again help support your war machine. If you haven't got that support to, well, pay your soldiers, build tanks, munitions, um, hospital equipment, you name it. There's a whole logistical support network behind armies that help again fund and promote that war effort. If you haven't got that economy to help fund and run that, then you're in a lot of trouble. And we have seen, especially through the past couple of weeks, that Russian logistical support almost be non-existent. We've heard of vehicles that have had rotting tires, and the tires have just rotted away, so the troops have had to abandon it. We've heard of tanks not only breaking down but running out of fuel as well. Um, Not only that, but Russian troops haven't even been supplied with enough supplies to eat. So clearly, if that's the way your invasion is going, and bear in mind, this is apparently costing Putin about $20 billion a day. And yet you look at the sanctions that have come onto Russia, there is going to be an economic collapse sooner or later. And it's just a matter of when that happens. And if that happens, well, there's no way Putin could even continue with his invasion because his economy is going to be in ruins. So again, we've got to ask all this time, what is Putin's endgame here? None of it makes any sense. But there you go. So anyway, before we do go jumping into this Atlantic article, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel that way. So this goes to the Atlantic. The title of Russia's Looming Economic Collapse. The war in Ukraine is being fought on two battlefields. The first battlefield is geographical. It is in the land Russia is tearing up with tank treads and pounding with missiles. The second battlefield is made up of not physical particles, but rather of relationships, contracts, and promises between nations, banks, companies, and individuals. This is the economic arena. While Russia holds the military advantage over Ukraine on the battlefield, one is getting destroyed by a Western alliance on the battlefield too. In the past few days, the United States and several European countries have declared a series of financial penalties against Russia that are without modern precedent for a major economy. These policies are triggering the financial catastrophe in Russia. And trying to get a proper grip on the second battlefield requires breaking down the news part of the several days into three categories: the global boycott of Russia, the economic crisis within Russia, and then the worldwide ripple effects that we're already starting to see. Over the weekend, the US and many European countries announced their intention to cut off Russia from banks with the trading platform SWIFT. That, again, has already happened. That is the Society for Worldwide International Bank Financial and Telecommunication. And this will prevent many Russian banks from trading in high volumes. And of course, the indirect effect is more important. A Russian bank that's being kicked from SWIFT becomes an undesirable place to keep money. The US Treasury and the European Central Bank have also announced that they would freeze Russia's foreign reserves. So what does that mean? The Russian central bank holds hundreds of billions of dollars that it can convert into rubles during a crisis to try and prop up its currency. By freezing the reserves held in Western banks, the US and Europe are basically disarming Russia of its best weapon in the event of a current crisis, essentially telling Russia, your assets are momentarily worthless. You don't even have 300 billion worth of assets, you have zero. Companies are also boycotting Russia too. BP and Shell have also announced plans to exit their joint ventures in major Russian energy companies. Some countries are now refusing to do business with Russia entirely. And Russia has been banned from the international soccer, hockey, and ice skating events. These actions amount to the sudden and also cultural exclusion of the entire nation. And of course, along with its geopolitical strategy, it puts it at odds with the West. Russia is an integrated member of the global economy. Only 12 countries in the world have more total exports. Russia trades oil, gas, and coal to much of Europe and even wheat to the Middle East and Africa. The sanctions imposed so far amount to a kind of siege of a country that depends on access to global markets. This is complete terra incognita for economic policy. No country has ever faced this kind of global freeze out. The implications are hard to predict, but several consequences are already apparent in the form of the bank runs and long ATM lines. On Monday, the London Stock Exchange listing of several Russian banks fell by more than 50%, and the ruble, trading like a junk cryptocurrency, collapsing more than 30% on Monday. And as it weakens, the price of certain imports will rise sharply. Unemployment will soar as the central bank steps in to try and print money in order to keep companies afloat, but this will also certainly lead to worse inflation. And to throttle the worst inflationary effects, the Russian bank has doubled its key interest rate to 20%. For perspective, that's higher than the US federal funds have ever been. Businesses are nervous that swift sanctions will shut down their international credit card accounts. In normal times, the worst effects of the most depressions aren't felt for months. However, this has happened all in the past 72 hours. Russia's economic crisis could also spark a brain drain. More young Russians are reportedly trying to emigrate. Today's problem could set the stage for a long-term decline in Russia's prosperity as people with the means and motivation get out to move to the West. Migrants will follow, however, they will face a mobility problem. The European Union has closed its airspace to Russian planes and private jets. The country is sealed off from Western trade, Western travel, and apart from energy exports, most Western businesses. In the next few weeks, the world is going to see a very chaotic lesson in economic interdependence. As the Wall Street Journal reports, Russia and Ukraine together amount for 20% of the world's corn exports and 80% of its sunflower oil. More than a dozen countries rely on Ukraine for more than 10% of their wheat consumption, and automotive companies rely on Ukraine for wiring systems. And much of the world relies on Russia for its oil, aluminium, and palladium, which are used for car parts and even jewelry. As the war starts to break Ukraine and cripples Russia, it will eventually send ripple effects across the world, including wheat shortages, food inflation, and of course, rising oil prices. And those are just the obvious first order effects. Bradley Jardine, a global fellow of the Wilson Center, a non-partisan research organization, writes that Tajikistan, a small Central Asian country north of Afghanistan, relies on remits from Russia for more than at least 20% of its GDP. That means workers in Russia stop sending money to their families in Turkestan, that the country's economy would basically take a complete nosedive into a depression. The economic crisis can spark political revolutions, and Turkestan just hold a border with China's westernmost province, Jiangxing. Russia's crisis could then become a Central Asian economic crisis, which could then become a Chinese political problem. And when that happens, and what happens, of course, in Russia will not stay in Russia. We should also not root too punitively or for calamity in Russia. The suffocation of the Russian economy might be morally justified given the ruinous invasion of Ukraine, but these measures are not without precedent. Maybe the sanctions will work by driving Putin to the negotiating table, or maybe they will just make him feel more cornered and cause him to lash out in a very catastrophic way, communicating suicide for the fear of death, as Otto von Bismarck put it. This was Vladimir Putin's war to start, and it will be Vladimir Putin's war to end. But if it falls to the West to convince Russia's leader that he has the most to gain by bargaining rather than bombing. So, yeah, this is going to be interesting, very interesting to see, because we've never seen anything play out like this in the world in terms of these scales of these sanctions and being put on a country. Um, this is almost going to be very, very interesting from an economics point of view to watch and see what happens. And certainly something we'll be keeping an eye on to see how this plays out. But hopefully, this will cause Putin to again stop this war, because the article said there, and we've said many times, the person who started this war was Putin, and the only person who can end this war really is Putin. So we've got to convince him to go to the negotiating table in good faith, because we've seen very recently he has not gone there in good faith, sending his basically equivalent of Nadine Dorris to the negotiating table. Not really a serious advocate there, or at least a good start for a peace program, shall we say. So ultimately, like I say, I do hope that these sanctions will force, like I say, Putin to the table. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.